Well, I tell you, we have a tremendous blessing for you, and that is Kelly Shackelford, who is the president and CEO of the Liberty Institute, has been since 1997. I've known him for many years and followed his ministry, and it's one of the great ministries in America today, on the cutting edge, out there on the front lines, defending Christian liberties and Christian rights. He's a constitutional scholar who has argued before the United States Supreme Court. He's testified before the U.S. House and the Senate on constitutional issues. He's won a number of landmark First Amendment religious cases. I am surprised he could come at all because ever since the last abominable decision of the Supreme Court, I'm sure his life has been a nightmare as people have been calling and saying, what do we do next? Churches, ministers, everyone else. Plus today he told me that his whole family's together, his children, and he's taken off from that to come over and share with us, and we really appreciate him doing that. Like both Robert Jeffress and Tim Wildman, Kelly has been severely attacked in the press, and in the process he's been called every name in the book. That, of course, is because he fights tenaciously and fearlessly for Christian rights and liberties. He's a frequent guest on national TV news and talk shows. His views have been featured on many national publications. He's a graduate of Baylor University, and most important, he's a dedicated Christian who is determined to stand against the wave of secularism and paganism that's sweeping our nation. His topic today is Religious Freedom Under Fire, a report from the front lines. Welcome, Kelly Shackelford.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. Thank you. It really is a privilege to be here, and you know, I was just thinking, oh, Dave, did you take my notes with you? I think you did.
I did.
This guy's something else, I tell you. Well, you're just testing me. Testing me, he's testing me. You know, I think most, you know, I remember years ago, I used to have to convince people that there were some issues going on with religious freedom. That's not something I have to do a lot anymore. And so I thought what I would do with you today is kind of give you a little bit of an update from the front lines on what's going on. But then also, there's probably a mixed group. There's probably people here who are well aware of Liberty Institute and what we do, and there's probably people who aren't. So I want to tell everybody kind of an update on what we're doing about this so that you can, I think, be encouraged by some things, because there's a lot of things that look real discouraging. So I'm going to try to do, you know, guys usually can do one thing at a time, and our wives can do about 15. Well, I'm going to do 2 today, I hope. Let me start with the basics. What's Liberty Institute? Liberty Institute's the largest legal organization in the country that focuses exclusively on religious freedom in the United States. That's all we do. You know, if like Giovanni Rubio, a little 5th grade boy whose favorite book was his Bible, and when he was told he couldn't read that at his public school during free reading time, he could read any other book but not his Bible. This is a very poor family. They wouldn't have had anybody that could have represented him. We want to make sure that Giovanni gets representation, which we did, we won, and that sets a precedent not only for him and his family, but really for the whole country, for our children, for our grandchildren, and so that's why we do what we do. How did I get involved in this? Back when I was in high school, I knew I had gifts in analytical thinking and speaking. And I thought, well, I either need to be a pastor or a lawyer. And people said, that's like a God or Satan choice, right? And, you know, I analyzed and I thought, you know, I'd probably do better with dispensing justice than mercy. I'd probably make a better lawyer than I would have. And I thought, you know, I need to go to law school. So I went to law school, and I went to Baylor Law School, and average intelligence compared to the other law students, average grades compared to them in college, good grades, but just average as for a law student. And my heart was really still in ministry, so I donated a lot of my time. I led the discipleship group for the college students at my church while I was at law school. Well, this is a really bad idea. Be an average intelligent student and then spend less time studying than everybody else. And because at law school, people study pretty much 24 hours. And, you know, but when the grades came back, I was making the high grades. And it was just God's way to show me, I want you to keep your heart for ministry, but I want you to use law. And so I got out, I clerked for a federal judge, chief judge, and you do that for 1 year. You sort of research and write opinions, and you know what it's like to be on the other side of the bench. So it really is a neat experience. And so all the big law firms want you to come work for them because you've had that perspective that's unique. So I had all those offers, and I sat in my little federal office, and I thought to myself, I just don't really feel like I should do that. I feel like I would suffocate if I did that. I don't feel called to that. And I remember thinking, well, what do you want to do? I thought, well, I'd like to use my legal skills because I feel like the Lord's shown me to do that, but I want to help pastors and churches and religious freedoms and our founding principles, and I'd even like to go to seminary part-time. And I laughed because there was no paying job like that in the United States. And I all of a sudden I got a call from two guys I had never met. They were partners in big law firms, and they said, will you come to lunch with us? And I said, sure. And at lunch they said, look, we started donating our time for religious freedom. We're now getting so many calls, it's hurting our ability to make a living. What we were wondering is, would you be willing to come on, do legal cases, help pastors, churches, religious freedoms, and our founding principles, and you can even go to seminary part-time if you want to. Now, being a young, mid-20s, maybe a little immature in my faith, I said, let me pray about it. Like that wasn't an answer to prayer. And the next morning I realized, oh my gosh, that was an answer to prayer. And I said yes, and they said, how much you need to live on? And I was making $28,000 as a clerk for a federal court. Those guys literally pitched in out of their pocket every month until we could start a group and start doing this type of thing. 26 years later, almost to exactly where, right now, here, Liberty Institute is the largest legal organization in the country that focuses exclusively on religious liberty in the U.S. So it's one of those American stories, but it's one of those God stories of God knowing that there was a need for this and creating it way back when maybe a lot of people didn't see how the need was going to grow. But I don't think very many people question that now. And one of the things I try to do, I speak in a lot of groups, and a lot of times I speak, it's not a group like this, it's a group of people who know the Lord and of people who don't have a faith at all. And so to them, they ask the question, and so this might help you as you talk to your friends who maybe haven't come to know the Lord. Why should they care about religious freedom, or should they care? And the answer is yes, and there are a lot of reasons. Our founders wrote about this a lot. I mean, this is our first freedom. They understood that if you lose this freedom, you'll lose all your freedoms. And I can't tell you how many people from Eastern European countries have come up to me after I've talked and said, I'm not a person of faith at all, but I totally agree with what you're doing. I saw this happen in my country. When religious freedom goes, then all your freedoms are about to leave. And I want to show you one quick 90-second video that, again, any person, whether they're a person of faith at all, I think will get the point of why religious freedom is so important to our country.
Some time ago, I had a conversation with a Marxist economist from China. He was coming to the end of a Fulbright fellowship here in Boston. And I asked him if he had learned anything that was surprising or unexpected. And without any hesitation, he said, yeah. I had no idea how critical religion is to the functioning of democracy. The reason why democracy works, he said, is not because the government was designed to oversee what everybody does, but rather democracy works because most people, most of the time, voluntarily choose to obey the law. And in your past, most Americans attended a church or a synagogue every week, and they were taught there by people who they respected. My friend went on to say that Americans followed these rules because they had come to believe that they weren't just accountable to society, they were accountable to God. My Chinese friend heightened a vague but nagging concern I've harbored inside that as religion loses its influence over the lives of Americans, what will happen to our democracy? Where are the institutions that are going to teach the next generation of Americans that they too need to voluntarily choose to obey the laws? Because if you take away religion, you can't hire enough police.
So that being the case, this being very important, how are we doing on religious freedom? Again, I don't think most people are in the dark on this at this point. I mean, we've got pastors having their sermons subpoenaed, not in Massachusetts or somewhere, in Houston, right? We've got, if you watch every day, you'll see something. We just do a survey. This is our survey for last year of all the attacks on religion. There's about 6 or 7 a page, and you can see this is everything from a 7-year-old boy who was caught praying over his meal and physically lifted out of his seat and taken to the principal's office and told to never do that again while he was at school, to senior citizens who are actually told that their federally funded meals were going to be taken away from them because they were praying over their meals and that would violate separation of church and state. It's in the North, it's in the South, it's people of wealth, it's people who are poor. There's literally, if you go through this, you'll realize how pervasive this is. This is a real issue. This is a real battle, and we've had years. We do this every year. We've had years literally where it's doubling from one year to the next, and how the increase. But it continually is increasing in the hostility and the attacks. And when you realize religious freedom is the first freedom, that this tells you, it kind of reminds me of when we had old cars. We used to have a little red light on the dashboard. And when that light came on, it was telling you that you were low on oil, and if you didn't do something, your engine was going to throw a rod or freeze up. That's what this is a sign of for our country. This is a sign that our country is in danger when you see this kind of attacks and the ever-increasing numbers on religious freedom. Now, that would be bad enough if we didn't have the Supreme Court decision we just had recently. And, the big debate now, or not debate really, but what the other side tries to pretend is, this won't have any impact on religious freedom. And that's the average American thinks, well, what does marriage have to do with me? Those 2 men or 2 women can go get married. It's not going to affect me. Oh, yes, it is. It's going to affect you. Why would you say that? I'll just tick off a few examples. Tax-exempt status of every religious organization is now going to be under attack. And you say, how could you say that? Well, I didn't say it. The Solicitor General of the United States said it during the oral argument at the Supreme Court on this case. They asked him, they said, look, if we do this decision and create this same-sex marriage as a constitutional right, then how can we allow people to have tax-exempt status if they're, discriminating against that right? And, you thought the Solicitor General would say, we're not going to go after everybody's tax-exempt status. No, the answer of the Solicitor General of the United States was, quote, that will be an issue. Okay? And it took, I think, 24 hours for Time Magazine to come out with their editorial after the decision saying religious groups need to give up their tax-exempt status if they have beliefs on marriage being a man and a woman. But that's just the beginning. You can look at other countries that have done this, and you think, let's say I don't really care about my church or any of the religious groups that have tax-exempt status. It won't affect me in other ways. Well, do you listen to the radio? Do you watch TV? How can you let people have an FCC license if they're engaging in discrimination against people in light of this new Supreme Court case? Look at Canada. You are not allowed to speak out against gay marriage on the air. Ask Dr. Dobson. Every time his shows were carried in Canada, they couldn't be carried on those issues. Okay? And I can guarantee you that if you have a pastor or a ministry or somebody who's now you're listening to on the radio or TV, I can't tell you they're going to lose. I sure hope they won't lose. We're going to fight with the Constitution at our back. But will there be an attack against everyone who holds those licenses or who has someone on that has those views? Absolutely, there's going to be an attack. What if you're a Christian college? It's already started. There are already calls for Christian colleges who have tax-exempt status that they need to have housing for gay couples. If they've got married housing, they can't be discriminatory. We could go down a long list of things. You've seen probably the news about the bakers, the florists, the photographers who are actually being persecuted out of business. The most recent one, of course, that's getting a lot of attention are the husband and wife that are bakers from Oregon, who simply said they couldn't, they'd be happy to make a cake for these people. In fact, they did before, but they couldn't make a wedding cake for 2 women because that would have them participating in a wedding and that would violate their faith. Right now, not only has their business been bankrupted, but they have a $135,000 fine for sticking to their religious beliefs. And the order also ordered them not to speak about their beliefs in a way that would express any discrimination against sexual orientation. So literally they wouldn't be able to speak and say marriage is a man and a woman. Now that's continuing to go. It's got another appeal, but these are the kind of things that are happening. You got Baronel Stutzman, 72-year-old grandmother. She's actually being now prosecuted because she wouldn't do a flower arrangement for two men in their wedding. She would sell them flowers. She loved them. She said, I can't arrange the flowers. Then I'm giving my expression to support something that my Lord says is not marriage. So she's not only looking at the last decision in that case was not only is her business now at jeopardy, but they've said that she's going to be personally liable and they can come after her home. Okay, a 72-year-old grandmother because she wouldn't do a flower arrangement. Now I could keep going through these cases, but the point is there are a lot of these attacks, and the thing that should bring it home to everybody is I ask people, well, you think this isn't going to affect you? Have you ever thought about what's going to happen in all the professions? They said, what do you mean? I said, do you think all professions have ethics codes? They have codes of conduct. Do you think that this issue isn't going to be brought into those codes of conduct? And it's not going to be a question of, well, if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor or a real estate agent or a psychologist, or you just keep going down the line, then you can't have these type of discriminatory views. You've got to sign this statement. I mean, you're literally talking about people maybe losing their profession. You might think, well, that's pretty radical. It's already happening. We've already got cases on this. So now with this Supreme Court case, you think it's not going to be even more energized. This is going to impact every person in this country. And these attacks are going to come in all of these different arenas, trying to use this to violate people's religious freedom. And I'm not saying we're going to lose those battles, but what I'm saying is we're going to have those battles now. And a lot of people say, they saw the decision and they're very down and depressed and they think, golly, it's over. And my really perspective as a guy who does religious freedom is the battle is literally just beginning. We are now deciding as a country whether we're going to keep religious freedom as our first freedom. The reason people came here is they left because they weren't allowed to hold their religious beliefs that were different from the government. They came here because here was a place you could dissent, you could disagree, you could hold to your religious conscience and not be punished by the government. And now everything I just went through with you are examples of the government trying to punish people for having different beliefs on marriage. Okay, to me, this is in the DNA of the American people as much as anything. The idea, the right to dissent, to disagree with the government, especially on a matter of conscience and faith. And so the battle really here is just beginning, but it is a battle. And I thought, let me show you a little bit in some different areas, kind of to give you a feel for how quickly things are moving. Let me start with education. I got a little video, and these are just cases within the last year that we've had, and you can see how quickly things are moving in that area.
I noticed that he has a book, a religious book in the classroom. He's not permitted to read those books in my classroom.
I was about to pray and say something to Jesus, and my lunch teacher told me that you're not allowed to pray.
I just simply said, bless you, and the teacher asked who said it. I told her that I did, and she asked why. I said I was just being courteous. She said, says who? I said my pastor, and my parents taught me that it was courtesy. After that, one of the classmates asked her what she had against the word bless you, and she said that there will be no godly speaking in the class.
The first and second times I submitted my speech last week, The school told me, as well as their attorneys, that any reference to God or Jesus or prayer of any kind was unconstitutional, and they would pull the mic on me.
That's when I said my pastor told me that I have a constitutional right, and it's my freedom of religion and freedom of speech. And then she sent me down to the office.
The third draft was denied. That was the afternoon of the graduation. Time was ticking down. I was at a crossroads and really wasn't sure of what to do.
Now, so long as students are following the rules of the classroom, we expect our teachers and school officials to follow the rules of the Constitution.
But I decided to really stick with what I wanted to give the message, and that was to stand up for my freedom of expression and stand up for my faith.
No man or woman has ever truly succeeded or been fulfilled on the account of living for others and not standing on what they knew in their heart was right or good.
I mean, you look at, that's just the last, year, and you've got kids being told, I don't know if you noticed the little 5-year-old girl who was told she couldn't pray over a meal. There was a quick clip of her. There was the girl who was told she couldn't say bless you. There was a number of the valedictorians who were told if they mentioned God, they'd be punished. One of them, actually, when he mentioned God, they were so mad that afterwards they said they were going to call the Naval Academy and try to get his offer revoked because he mentioned God in the valedictory address. The stuff that the kids are going through is incredible. The good news is the rights are all on their side. They have every right to live out their faith. They have every right to express their beliefs. And these are violations that are happening, and every time we're having these kids stand up, we're winning over and over again. But it's just getting more hostile. And you can see how quickly things are moving in the schools, but probably one of the quickest areas it's moving is in the military. 2 years ago, we had 3 areas. We said religious freedom. We're here to protect and to restore religious freedom in our schools, for our churches, and in the public arena. Well, now if you look, we have 4. We had to open a whole flank just for the military because of what was going on. And I think most people have seen the cases where they're going after all the veterans memorials that have religious imagery like a cross. Probably the first one of these our case was the Mojave Desert Cross. It's put up in 1934 by the hands of World War I vets who'd come back from the war, and it's put up in the middle of the desert, 1.6 million acres of desert. And it sat there for 70 years. It's just a lone 7-foot cross with a little plaque on the bottom that said, "For the dead of all wars," and had their VFW post. 70 years until somebody from the ACLU said, "Hey, we found this cross," and brought a lawsuit to have it torn down after 70 years. Unbelievably, the Federal District Court and Court of Appeals said, tear it down. We jumped in at that point on behalf of all the major veterans groups, the American Legion, the Military Order of the Purple Heart, the American Ex-Prisoners of War, and the VFW, and we said, no, absolutely not. Now, while it was on appeal, I just want to show you a picture of what the court ordered be done to that memorial. I mean, that's a bag with a chain around the bottom with a padlock on the bottom. Of course, what's great is you still know it's the cross, but what a picture. What a picture. I mean, you look at that and you think, what is this, the USSR? You think it's not America. Now, some people say, why do you make a big deal about this? You went to the Supreme Court, got this reversed, that cross is back up. True. Fox News was there with a satellite truck when the cross went back up. It was carried all over the country. We won at the Supreme Court 5-4. Okay? You change one vote, this is the law. This picture is the law. So it just shows you how close we are and the kind of attacks that are even starting in the... At least you would say, well, at least these attacks against veterans memorials are over. No. We now have the Mount Soledad cross, which has been up since the 1950s. The last order in that court was tear it down. We've got a stay of that, but we're still fighting that case. In Maryland, the Peace Cross, that was put up literally through the funds. Yeah, that's the Peace Cross right there. Up for over 90 years. Put up by mothers who lost their sons in the war. And now there's a lawsuit to tear it down because it's a cross. We're seeing these, all across the country. You have 5 different ones that we're defending in different places. But the problem is these attacks aren't just on the outward symbols. And that is very important. If you talk to anybody who's lived in these Eastern European countries, the first thing they do is they take down the religious symbols and they put up the secular symbols. So it is very powerful and very important, but it goes much further than just the symbols. I mean, we're having this happen internally within the military. Sergeant Phillip Monk, 19 and a half years in the Air Force, was in Iraq, patched up over 600 people. When you see guys come back without an arm or a leg, it was Sergeant Monk who was patching those people up. Had to clean the blood of his buddies off his boots, came back to the United States for his lesbian commander to say to him, I need you to agree with me on gay marriage. And he said, look, this is the Air Force. We can have different beliefs on other things as long as we're consistent on the policies and the mission of the Air Force. He said, no, I need you to tell me right now that you agree with me on gay marriage. Well, he wouldn't answer the question because he knew she wasn't going to like his answer. So she relieved him of his duties after 19 and a half years. Now, he was on the phone with us wondering, look, he said, my pension vests at 20 years. I mean, my sons, my wife, I could lose everything if I oppose what's going on here. About 3 days later, he was having a Bible study with his 3 boys. And it just naturally occurred in his Bible study, and before he knew what he said to his boys, sons, you have to be willing to stand for your faith. And when he did, it just convicted him. And he picked up the phone and he called us and he said, let's go. My sons are watching me. And we filed a complaint. We have on staff a JAG, a former military litigator for about 10 years in the military, taught at the Naval Academy. Did everything correct like you're supposed to. The first thing they did was read Sergeant Monk his Miranda rights and open a criminal investigation against him to try to intimidate him. Okay? He told me, he said, I'm getting all these emails and texts from people I served with in Iraq, and they're saying, Philip, I'm praying for you. Philip, I'm behind you. I just can't come out publicly. And he said, I never knew any of these guys were Christians because we weren't allowed to talk about that. And that told me everything about how things had gone wrong in the military. I mean, George Washington, when he established the military, the first thing he did is gave everybody a Bible and established chaplains. Because he understood that if you don't have religious freedom in the military, you're going to have a really bad military. Because they need to be able to rely on their faith. They need that. And so what's been going on there has been incredible. And we've got 2 new cases. Some of you have heard about these. So Sergeant Monk, the good news is it ended well. And I'll tell you a little bit about that later. But we've got 2 more that we don't know how they're going to end that are probably ones you've heard about because they're all over the national scene. One is Chaplain Wes Modder. Guys, he's not only a chaplain, he's a chaplain like to the Special Forces, like SEAL Team 6. He's been deployed 14 times, perfect record, until all of a sudden a few months ago, some people complained because in one-on-one counseling he was asked about sex and what the Bible says about sex, like homosexuality, etc. And he talked about sex being only proper within marriage and marriage of a man and a woman, which is exactly what he's an Assemblies of God pastor, what he should do in accordance with his faith. He's now been detached for cause, meaning he's been kicked out of his position out of 19 and a half years for being, quote, intolerant. Okay? Well, if our chaplains can't answer a biblical question with a biblical answer, then they're not chaplains anymore. And so this is a fight about whether we're going to have chaplains anymore in this country. Now, Wes Modder is standing up, and we're going to do everything we can. We're fighting all the way through the system, and then if we have to go into court after that, if the Secretary of Navy doesn't correct this, if that's what's necessary, then we'll go into court. Because they violated numerous laws when they did this to Wes. There are specific laws protecting chaplains that they violated. But the point is, we're having a fight here. The last one you probably heard about is Monifa Sterling, who was court-martialed. And by that, I don't mean she was threatened with a court-martial. She was convicted, court-martialed, for having a scripture verse taped to the bottom of her work computer. Okay? And we're now having to appeal this to what's called the Court of Military Appeals, which is essentially the military Supreme Court, because the Marine Court of Appeals affirmed this. Said that somebody might be offended if they walk by her workstation. Yeah, these little weak Marines, I'm sure they would just be, just torn apart by her scripture verse. And then in another place, in the opinion, they say, well, the Religious Freedoms Restoration Act doesn't protect her because this really wasn't a religious exercise. So it's so religious that it offends people in one part of the opinion, and then in the other part it's not religious. It's just gobbledygook, you know, it's ridiculous. And so we're going to the highest level. We hope to get a precedent that makes clear throughout all branches of the military that religious freedom applies to them. And so the military is a place we're having to fight that we didn't even used to, but it is very important, because if we lose the military, that's a lot of times how you lose your country. I mean, if you end up pushing people of faith and religious freedom out of the military, eventually you end up with, I'm just following orders. You end up with Hitler's SS. And you get the wrong leader and you lose a country. You lose your freedoms. So this is a very important area to battle. The last area I'd mention to you is the workplace. And again, I could give you a lot of examples, but I just want to give you one. I think most people have heard about the Hobby Lobby case, right? Very few people know what was argued in the Hobby Lobby case. Our government, the Solicitor General of the United States, got up in front of all justices. This was their main argument, and argued that once you go into for-profit business, you are making the decision to waive your religious freedoms. And, quote, you now play by the government's rules. Now, they lost on that argument, but they picked up a number of votes from justices for the first time in our country. So, you know, this is a battle now where if they can take over the workplace, they take over where people live most of their waking hours. And religious freedom is basically, you know, extinguished or pushed into your home and your church is where you can experience it. Now, it's not just employers, though. It's employees. We now have a whole stack of cases. We never used to have any cases like what I'm about to describe to you, and now we got a number of them. We filed one this week. We're filing another next week. We're filing another the week after that. Cases where people are losing their jobs, not because of anything they say at work or do at work, but because their employer is finding out where they go to church or what they believe, and if they believe marriage is a man and a woman. And you think, well, surely not. Yeah, I could give you example after example. A lot of people know who Craig James is. Played at SMU, was All-American, ended up being an All-Pro, played for the New England Patriots, and then became a broadcaster. And was a broadcaster for many years until he decided to run for Congress, or actually for Senate. He ran against, you know, Ted Cruz, which didn't work out so well for him, right? Ted Cruz won. But during that race, they were asked a question. What is your position on marriage? Well, Craig James said, I'm with God's definition. Marriage is a man and a woman. Okay? So he loses the race. He decides, I'm going back into sports broadcasting. Fox Sports hires him and sends out a press release of the accolades of all of his, you know, background, what an incredible broadcaster he is, etc., which he is. And he got on the first night, did a great job. The next day he was fired. Why? Well, we don't have to guess, because the PR head of Fox Sports said to the Dallas Morning News that it was his answer in the campaign. They found out after he was on the air, because some people complained in their main office in Los Angeles, that they didn't like his views of marriage. And that, quote, those kind of views won't play well in our HR department. So think about this. They fired him not because of any of his work, but because of their bigotry against his religious beliefs outside of work. Clear violation of the law. But it's not just there. We've got a guy by the name of Eric Walsh. He was a director of public health for the city of Pasadena. State of Georgia said, we want you to be our director of public health for a whole region of the state. He accepted the job. Before he gets there, some activists from California call the Georgia State Department and say, you need to look at his beliefs and where he goes to church. We now have copies of the emails of the government officials divvying up the sermons from his church and deciding who's going to read which sermon. The next day they fired him because he believed marriage was a man and a woman. Okay? I just want you to think about this. They fired him not because of anything he did or said at work, but because of what was said in his church on Sunday. So this is the attack. I had a friend of mine who's a barrister from the UK, and he said, this started happening to us about 7 years ago, and we were a little slow, to respond, and we lost these cases. He said, if you lose these cases, you don't just lose these cases. It quickly becomes that those views are a danger to the profession. You name the profession. And then eventually people have to decide, do you want your profession or would you rather be able to live out your faith? And he said about 70% of our country decided, I'll keep my profession. And he said, that's when you'll lose your country. He said, so you better not just win these cases, you better inflict pain when you win these cases and send the message that this doesn't happen in the United States of America. And that's what we're trying to do, and that's what should happen. Now, at this point, some of you are saying, boy, Dave, thanks for inviting the depressing speaker to our weekend event. Okay? So let me tell you the good news. The good news is that we actually have a method of dealing with this, and it's not a theoretical method. It's something we've been doing for years, and it's working. And that is that if you look at all the nonprofit legal groups in the country, whatever issue they work on, whether they're left-wing or whatever they are, they do the same model. Raise as much money as you can raise, hire as many attorneys with that money as you can, put them in an office in D.C. or New York or somewhere, and then fly them around the country and cover as many cases as you can cover. That's not our model. Our model is, I would call the body of Christ model. There's all these people that went to law school who are believers, who went to law school because they wanted to stand for what was right. They wanted to make a difference. You know, they wanted to ride in on the white horse with a saber and save the day, right? 30 years later, these are the best litigators at the best law firms in the country. And they've done honorable work for people who've paid them, you know, major corporations and big clients, but they've never gotten to do a case for the kingdom. So we come along and we go to these best of the best all over the country and we say, if we give you everything you need, are you willing to give your time on one of these cases? They're like, you know, I've been waiting my whole life. Sign me up. But you can imagine what's going to happen the first time in their life. All their talent, all their gifts, all their training is lined up with their faith and their love for their country. They have never felt that before. And so it's kind of unfair, but we now know at that point, we give them the first case, we now have them for the rest of their lives as one of our volunteer attorneys. And they're the partners, they're the big shots, so they give cover to all the younger attorneys. They get to taste of what this is like, and they don't ever want to go back. I mean, we literally have cases where we have 10 attorneys on a case. You do not need 10 attorneys on a case. Nobody would pay for 10 attorneys on a case. Some of these guys charging, you know, $1,200, $1,400 an hour, okay? And, but you know, they're like, you've got to let me work on this case, okay? And the interesting thing of this is we're the only ones doing this method. And my brilliance was, hey, we can save money and get a lot more done. Now that is true. On an average case, for every $10,000 we spend, we get $60,000 donated. So literally, it's like Jesus and the loaves and the fish. You know, it's like you pull out one and it turns into 6. You know, because of all these people in the body that are coming and saying, "I'm in this case." But the other thing I didn't count on was the win-loss ratio, and that is if you watch all the legal groups, you'll find that they'll win a case, they'll lose a case, they'll win a case, they'll lose a case. They're like 50-50. If they're really good, maybe they're 60-40. Our win rate for over 12 years in a row has been above 95% of all of our cases. And it's really God, it's the grace of God, but it's His method. I mean, when we have a case in Montana, our attorney is from Montana. He's from the biggest law firm in Montana. He grew up there, right? Because the body of Christ is everywhere. We got these attorneys everywhere, okay? And when he goes into court, I mean, the judge was his old fishing buddy. They were in elementary school together, right? And the ACLU guy from New York City is at a severe disadvantage in understanding the community he's in and what he needs to do and the jury pool and everything else. So you can see, and plus the talent level. I mean, our volunteer attorney of the year 2 years ago was Paul Clement. Former Solicitor General of the United States, argued more cases at the Supreme Court than any attorney alive in the last 10 years. And, you know, if somebody said, Kelly, here, I'm going to make, you know, you're tax deductible. I'm going to make a $5 million donation. You go, every year I'm going to give it to you. You go hire Paul Clement and pay his salary. Paul's a friend of mine, but Paul's not going to come work at a nonprofit because the most powerful attorneys in the country are going to work at the most powerful law firms in the country. So the only way to get this talent is by doing what we do. But we're the only ones doing this. So what this means is every time we go into court, we have one of the best lawyers and law firms in the country, and on the other side is either a government attorney or a nonprofit attorney. And it's just a huge disadvantage. And they're local. So you put all that together, the grace of God, and the fact that this is about religious freedom. The law is all on our side. That's why people came to this country. The Constitution supports it, the law supports it, our history supports it. We should win these cases. So really, the only issue that we really get to is just whether people are willing to stand up. And I'll get back to that in a second. Let me run through this real quick. Quick little history thing. Guess what happens when you start winning close to 99% of your cases? Everybody comes to you and says, hey, I want you to do our case here. And we were a Texas group. We were happy. We thought there's plenty of work in Texas. We'll just do Texas stuff. Well, all of a sudden, we were being pulled all over the country. So we really felt the Lord telling us, and we prayed a lot about this, you need to go national. And we didn't know how quickly things would be exploding in our country, but God did. And He knew we needed to go national. And so we started that process. And so I want to show you some stuff, because I think this is very encouraging. When we started, show this slide with our problem. This was our problem. We beat the ACLU in every case we're in, but we were 3 million and they were 120 million. So we just couldn't be everywhere they were. So we said, you know, this is part of why we go national. And so go to the next slide. This was our goal. We were going to go from 3 million to 5 million to 7 million to 9 million. The 12 is kind of that was just a placeholder. But 3 to 5 to 7 and 9. That was our goal after a lot of prayer. All right, go to the next slide. This is where we started. We had 3,000 supporters, and they were all in Texas. Now let me show you just a little over 2 to 2.5 years later where we were. Okay? We now have 40,000 people supporting, and they're from every state in the United States. Literally, there's an army building that wants to be involved in this issue, and they just hadn't had an opportunity to. But let me show you what that's caused us to be able to do. Flip to the next one, which shows the case. When we just started, and we were just being pulled, here's where our cases were around the U.S. Okay. Now, let me show you there. This is just 2.5 years later. Because with all those new people involved giving support, allowing us to increase capacity to help more people, you can see how quickly, in just a couple of years, 2.5 years, and we plan to continue to increase at those rates. We think the whole thing's going to be red by the time we finish with cases. So to me, the encouragement of this is, number one, there are plenty of people around this country that have not been involved. They want to be involved, and they want their country pulled back to what it was founded upon. Yeah. And we're winning these cases. I mean, you look at all these numbers, we're winning huge percentages. Like last year, we had 250 legal matters, and we lost exactly 0 cases. Okay? So my big question was, when we went national, was we've got this model that's working, but is it scalable? It seems like it is, but when you get bigger and bigger and bigger and cover more and more and more, you always wonder, does it work? Well, we've doubled twice now in our number of cases, and it's working. As I mentioned, you know, we're still having the high percentage of wins, all that's working. So to me, the only question on this battle is, I mean, in addition to God's favor in His hand, whether he continues to give us His hand of favor and protection, is, are we willing to stand up on these things? That's the only thing that's going to determine, the only way we can lose right now with what we're seeing is if people aren't willing to stand up. And by that I mean, Sergeant Monk, I mentioned to you earlier, when I was at his retirement party where he won all these awards, including additional awards for standing up like he did. In fact, Congress changed the law and made clearer the religious freedoms that you had in the Air Force because of what he did. But I was sitting next to his pastor, and his pastor turned to me and he said, you know, there were 9 other people in my church that had similar or worse experiences than Phillip Monk. But Phillip was the only one willing to step forward. And so to me, this is what is going to determine, are we going to be able to turn this thing around? Are we going to be able to win these cases? We've got to have people that are willing to stand up. We've got to have people that are willing to say, you know, there's a cost to following Christ, and I can't control the results, but I know who I'm following. And that's key. And it's not only those persons, but are people going to come around them when they stand up? You know, are we going to have enough? Because right now we're turning away about 5 good cases a week because we're just capacity. We're not up. We're growing. We're just not growing fast enough for the need. You know, our prayer and our goal is that we get to the point where everybody, as soon as it happens, we can pull a team right behind them, and that's where we want to go. So if we, as a country, are willing to stand up, I think we win all these cases. Again, I think this is the very core of why this country was founded, religious freedom. And, you know, if we can't win that battle, then really all is lost. And I think we can. We're showing proof we're winning this battle if we're willing to fight it. And so it kind of reminds me a lot of Joshua 1. You know, I feel like that's our time right now, where God had to tell the Israelites, be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. I think we need to hear the same thing. I think we know that time's coming right now, and we need to be strong and courageous. The good news is that was on their way to the promised land. So we could be on our way too. This is a time for us to really make a difference, to stand up, to speak the truth, and to be willing to stand for the truth and for what we know is right, not only for us, but for the future of this country and our children and our grandchildren and what kind of country they're going to get. And I think if we do that, we can win. It's just a matter of the willingness of people getting in the loop and knowing what's going on. All these 40,000 people, they all have friends. They're all now like on our email list, and they can share that with their friends. And now other people are becoming aware. They know there's a place to call and get help for free, those kind of things. So I would encourage you, we might have 5 minutes or so, or however, I'm happy to do Q&A and snide remarks, whatever you guys want to do. But I'll say this, some of you will say, how can I get involved? Well, I know a number of you have already seen, you've been with us for years and you're involved. If you're not, we have some things we'll give you for free out there. We have a smaller version of this book, okay, where you can just look at, it's like 250, I think, instead of 1,600 of the cases. And you get a feel real quickly for how pervasive things are. But I'd love for everybody who has a heart for this at all to make sure you get on our list where you're getting our emails and stuff like that, so you can see what's happening, because a lot of this stuff is not going to be talked about in the media, and you can educate other people. And probably if you see something happening somewhere else, it's probably about to happen or is happening in your community and you just don't know it yet. So it's a great sort of information pool to be in and to see what's going on. Because I'd love for you to be praying for these cases, to be sharing this with other people, to be involved in what other way. I mean, we're kind of building an army, and there's all kinds of different people in the army. You know, there's people that want to do hand-to-hand combat. There's people that want to be snipers, and there's people that want to make sure that they provide the supply line, because the supply line is the most important part of an army. As one of my guys said, you know who wins the wars? It's not the guys with the best soldiers if they don't have the supply line. You can have the best soldiers, but if they're cut off, they can't do anything. So everybody has their way or their calling, how they want to be involved. We'd love to have you involved if you want to be involved. But don't be discouraged. There's a lot, I mean, there are bad things happening, but really, I mean, the one way you can look at it is, what a time to represent Christ. When actually standing for Him is something that stands out, and that when everything about the future of our country kind of hangs in the balance. And it really is going to depend upon those who know the Lord and whether they're willing to be faithful and to be able to redeem what's happening and turn things back in the right directions. It's sort of in our lap right now. And it'll be up to us and to the Lord on what happens. But I think it's a tremendous time to actually follow the Lord in the midst of all that's happening around us. So always see us as a resource. And I'm happy to, I don't know if anybody has a quick question or two, because I know we got a few minutes. Yes? The question was, do we handle class action suits or is it always individual? Class action suits are real difficult in our area of the law, so there aren't really any in constitutional cases, unless something really, really rare. So typically our cases are representing individuals, groups, or numbers of individuals or groups, because it's somebody that the government has violated their constitutional rights. Religious freedom, free speech, etc., like that. And so there's a particularized injury that involves certain individuals. Yes? Yeah, good question. The question is, how does the ACLU get their funds? Through donations, mainly, through across the country. I think last year, I showed you 120. I think last year it was 150 million. But they have people like George Soros, for instance. I know one year gave them $28 million check. And so they have people that give to that, and they're the largest one. Some of these other groups, Freedom from Religion Foundation, I think they're like a $2 to $3 million group. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I showed you our deal. We're going to go from 3 to 5 to 7 to 9. We went from 3 at the end of the first year, we were at 5,050,000. At the end of the second year, instead of 7, we were at 8.4. And we just ended our third year, and instead of 9, we were 8.5. So we've almost tripled in 3 years. So we're growing exactly like the Lord sort of laid out to us, grow as fast as you can because of the need. But yeah, the ACLU, it just comes from donations, mainly. If they file a lawsuit against the government and they win, you actually recover your attorney's fees, but that's a pretty small portion of their funding. Most of their funding comes from liberal foundations and gifts from more liberal folks who want them to have a lot of money to cause the problems that they cause. The good news is we beat them over and over again. We just need to be able to be everywhere they are.
In God We Trust is encoded in law as our national motto. It's also on our currency. You see that under attack too?
Yeah, the question is, in God We Trust is a national model. It's also on our currency. Do I see that as being under attack? Yeah, there's lawsuits going on now. They filed lawsuits against the Pledge of Allegiance. We've had 2 of those. The Texas Pledge of Allegiance, which was just passed a few sessions ago, where they included the words "under God" in that one, that was challenged. We went all the way to the 5th Circuit and won that case. So far, these attacks against "In God We Trust" and the Pledge of Allegiance and things like that have all lost. But the other side is going to continue. And what they do a lot, especially this Freedom from Religion Foundation, is they send letters to like school districts, counties, cities, and they say, you either take that, like Steubenville, Ohio had a city seal, and they had a steeple as part of their city seal because when it was formed in like 1800, there was a steeple as part of the landscape. Well, they get a letter from Freedom from Religion saying, you don't take that steeple off, we're going to sue you. And so we go and we tell these people a lot of times, we say, look, we'll defend you for free, you get the best attorneys in the country, and they're like, yeah, but if we lose, we have to pay their attorney's fees, so we're just going to take it off our seal. So this is happening around the country where they get these letters. This Freedom from Religion group is not very good. If you look at their win-loss ratio, they rarely win anything lawsuit-wise. They win by threatening and intimidating. And so we realize if people don't do something about this, we're going to lose all this religious freedom and our religious heritage just because people are folding up. And so we actually had some donors come forward and kick into a fund called our American Heritage Project. It was actually a crazy idea. We thought if I had about $3 million, what we could do is go to these cities and counties and not only will we represent you for free, and not only will you have the best attorneys, but anything assessed against you, you see this fund, you're covered. And I just mentioned that at a lunch, and I guess I was lucky where I was in Midland. And there's a lot of oil and gas stuff going on there. And before I knew it, I had 4 guys saying, we're doing $2.5 million. And within a couple of months, there was $3 million. So we're now doing that. When they get these threatening letters, we're going to the city, the counties, and we're saying, we've got your back completely. So far, I think it's more than this now, but the last I checked, there had been 12 of these in a row where we had gone to them. They had said, great, let's send a letter to the Freedom from Religion saying, come get us. And 12 times in a row, they ran. Okay? So if we keep doing that, then eventually the letters will be a joke, and they'll realize that what they're saying is not what the law is. The Constitution protects religious freedom, and it's okay to have monuments that are religious and non-religious. That's part of who we are as a country. I mean, I think one of the things the enemy always tells us is one person can't make a difference, and there's no bigger lie than that, right? I mean, almost everything in the Bible is one person making a difference, and that's what we see in our cases. One person stands up, and the whole community stands with them, and everything changes. So realize one person makes all the difference in the world, and we're here to help you. If you ever have a situation with you your children, your grandchildren, somebody you know, a neighbor. You know, we're the thing that nobody believes in, free attorneys. So you can call us and we're happy to help. Thank you.
It is hard to believe. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you.